I don't think I did anything wrong. I just tried to keep my family together, even after my husband handed me those divorce papers and that damning DNA report. They all act like I'm some sort of monster, but honestly, I just did what I had to do. Now everyone is on his side, and I'm the one left alone to explain myself. But maybe, if I tell you the whole story, you'll understand that sometimes good people have to make difficult choices. The kitchen smelled like roast beef and simmering tension that Sunday afternoon. I was arranging the good china while Simon carved the meat with mechanical precision, his jaw tight in that way that had become all too familiar. His mother, Marjorie, sat at our dining table like a judge presiding over court, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of our supposedly perfect family home. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. "Lila, sweetheart, come show Grandma your new drawing," I called to our 5-year-old daughter, who was coloring in the living room. She bounded in with her dark curls bouncing, clutching a crayon masterpiece of stick figures. "Oh my," Marjorie said, studying Lila's appearance with barely concealed scrutiny. "She certainly has gotten so much darker hair lately, hasn't she? And those eyes, they're almost black now." I forced a bright laugh, smoothing Lila's hair. "She must get that from my side of the family. You know how genetics can be. Sometimes traits skip generations." Simon's carving knife paused mid-slice. His younger brother Mason, who'd been scrolling through his phone, looked up with interest. "Funny thing about genetics," Mason said with a smirk. "Usually you can trace them pretty clearly if you know what to look for." "Mason?" their mother warned, but her tone suggested she didn't entirely disapprove of his comment. I busied myself with serving the vegetables, trying to ignore the way Simon's shoulders had tensed even further. "Simon's been working so hard lately," I said, addressing the elephant in the room. "He's barely home before 8 most nights. I keep telling him he needs to take better care of himself." "Is that so?" Marjorie's voice was deceptively mild. "And how do you spend your evenings, Verity? All alone with Lila?" The question felt loaded, but I maintained my smile. "Oh, the usual mom stuff. Sometimes I have to work late too. The medical office has been so busy. Thank goodness for helpful co-workers who can pick up Lila from daycare when needed." Simon's head snapped up. "Helpful co-workers?" "Just Ethan from accounting," I said quickly. "He's been so sweet about helping out when you're stuck at the office. I don't know what I'd do without friends like that." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Lila seemed to sense the tension, looking between the adults with confused 5-year-old eyes. My mother, Evelyn, who'd been quietly arranging flowers in the corner, finally spoke up. "Well, I think it's wonderful that Verity has support at work. Marriage is about teamwork, after all." "Teamwork," Marjorie repeated slowly. "Yes, I suppose it is, built on trust and transparency." I began clearing the dishes with perhaps more force than necessary. "Simon, honey, you've been so quiet today. Are you feeling all right? You know how you get when you're overworked, all paranoid and distant." "Paranoid?" Simon's voice was dangerously quiet. "Oh, you know what I mean," I laughed, addressing the table. "He gets these ideas in his head when he's stressed. Last week he accused me of moving his coffee mug, as if I have nothing better to do than hide his things." Mason snorted. "Maybe he's just paying attention to details he used to miss." "What's that supposed to mean?" I challenged, but Mason just shrugged and returned to his phone. As I carried the plates to the kitchen, I could hear Marjorie's voice drop to a whisper. "Simon, sweetheart, you know I don't like to interfere, but—" "I know, Mom," Simon replied quietly. "I'm getting answers soon." My hands trembled slightly as I set the dishes in the sink. When I returned to the dining room, Simon was looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Verity," he said softly, "is there anything important you've ever lied to me about?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone was staring at me now. Marjorie with barely concealed suspicion, Mason with open hostility, my mother with growing concern, and Simon with something that looked almost like hope that I'd finally tell the truth. "What kind of question is that?" I managed to say. "Of course not. Why would you even ask me that?" But even as the words left my mouth, I could see in Simon's eyes that he already knew the answer. The medical office break room felt smaller than usual Monday morning, like the walls were closing in. I sat at the corner table, stirring my coffee and trying to ignore the way my coworkers kept glancing at me. Ethan Caro sat across from me, his usually confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "We need to talk about what happens if," he began in a low voice. "If what?" I cut him off, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. Everything is fine." "Fine." His dark eyes, so much like Lila's, searched my face. "Your husband called the office Friday asking about your work schedule. That doesn't sound fine to me." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "Simon's just been stressed lately. His job has been demanding and he's taking it out on me. It's actually kind of controlling behavior if you ask me. Verity, listen to me. No, you listen." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I have everything under control. Simon is paranoid and insecure, but I can handle him. The last thing we need is you panicking and making things worse." Dr. Martinez's receptionist, Janet, approached our table with a concerned expression. "Verity, honey, is everything okay at home? You seem so tense lately." I plastered on my brightest smile. "Just the usual married life drama. You know how men can be. They see problems where none exist. Simon's convinced I'm hiding something from him, but honestly, I think he's just looking for reasons to be jealous." Janet frowned. "That doesn't sound healthy. Have you considered counseling?" "I've suggested it, but Simon refuses. He'd rather play detective than actually work on our communication." I sighed dramatically. "Sometimes I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should—" "Should what?" I interrupted. "There's nothing for us to do except continue being professional colleagues. Right, Ethan?" He nodded reluctantly, but I could see the worry in his expression. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Called to check on you after yesterday's dinner. Everyone seemed so tense. Are you sure everything's all right?" I quickly typed back, "Everything's fine. Simon's family just likes to stir up drama. You know how they are." But even as I sent the message, another text came through. This one from Mason. "Saw you and your coworker at Cafe Luna last Tuesday. Interesting lunch meeting." My blood ran cold. I deleted the message without responding, but my hands were shaking. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, noticing my reaction. "Nothing. Just family drama." I forced another smile. "You know what? I think we should keep our distance for a while, just until things settle down at home. Verity, if there's a chance that Lila—" "Don't!" My voice was sharper than I intended. "Don't even go there. Lila is Simon's daughter, and that's the end of it." But as I walked back to my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. I spent the rest of the day deleting text messages and clearing my call history, but when I got home that evening, Simon was sitting at the kitchen table with our phone bill spread out in front of him. "Interesting reading?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than they had that morning. "We need to talk, Verity, after dinner, about something important." The way he said it made my stomach clench with dread. But I nodded and began preparing dinner, all while feeling like I was cooking my last meal as a free woman. Romano's family restaurant had been our traditional Sunday dinner spot for 3 years, but that evening it felt more like a tribunal than a family gathering. Both our families were there. Marjorie and Mason on one side of the large table, my mother Evelyn on the other, with Simon and me sitting across from each other like opposing lawyers. Lila sat between us, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling through the air. "The lasagna here is always so good," I said brightly, trying to fill the oppressive silence. "Don't you think so, Simon?" He barely looked up from his untouched plate. "Sure." Marjorie set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "You know, I was looking through some old photo albums last week. It's fascinating how family resemblances develop over time." "Oh, I love looking at baby pictures," I replied, though my smile felt increasingly strained. "Lila changes so much every month." "Yes, she certainly does." Marjorie's tone was pointed. "She's looking less and less like Simon these days, isn't she?" Mason snorted into his beer. "That's one way to put it." "Mason," Evelyn warned, "that's not appropriate dinner conversation." "What's not appropriate," Mason replied, "is pretending we don't all see what's happening here." I laughed, though it sounded forced even to my ears. "You know, it's funny how paranoid this family has become. Simon's been acting like I'm some kind of criminal lately, questioning everything I do, everyone I talk to. It's honestly becoming a bit embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" Marjorie's eyebrows rose. "What's embarrassing is watching my son suffer in silence while—" "While what?" I interrupted. "While I work hard to support our family? While I take care of Lila when he's too busy with his precious job to come home? While I deal with his constant suspicion and jealousy?" The restaurant seemed to quiet around us, other diners glancing over at our increasingly heated exchange. Simon finally spoke, his voice deadly calm. "Tell them about Ethan." My heart stopped. "What about Ethan?" "Tell them about your helpful coworker who picks up our daughter from daycare. He's just a friend who's been supportive during a difficult time in our marriage," I said, looking around the table for support. "Simon has become so controlling and paranoid that he sees threats everywhere. It's actually quite concerning behavior." "Controlling?" Simon's voice rose slightly. "I asked you a simple question about why another man is signing pickup sheets for my daughter, and you're calling me controlling?" "Our daughter," I corrected. "And yes, when you interrogate me about every friendship I have, every minute of my day, every person I speak to, that's controlling behavior, Simon. I'm starting to feel like I'm married to a prison warden." Marjorie slammed her hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "How dare you sit there and make my son sound like the problem when you're the one—" "When I'm the one what?" I challenged. "Taking care of my family? Being a good mother? Having friends who actually support me instead of constantly questioning my every move?" "Friends," Mason repeated with disgust. "Is that what we're calling it?" The waiter approached our table with a nervous smile, carrying a small cake with a single candle. "Excuse me, folks. The table next to you mentioned you were celebrating a new baby in the family. This is on the house." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the cake, my mind racing. Had someone misheard our conversation? Were people talking about us? Simon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "There's no baby," he said quietly. "There's just a lot of questions that need answers." He walked out of the restaurant without another word, leaving me sitting there with both families staring at me in stunned silence. "Well," I said, trying to salvage the situation, "I guess that proves my point about his behavior lately." But no one was buying it anymore. I could see it in their faces, the doubt, the suspicion, the growing certainty that I was the problem. When we got home that night, Simon was waiting in our bedroom with a look I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something far worse. Cold determination. "Is Lila really my child, Verity?" The question hung between us like a blade. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I couldn't find the words to lie my way out of it. Our bedroom felt like a courtroom that night, with Simon sitting on the edge of our bed holding a manila folder and me standing by the dresser, my back literally against the wall. The overhead light cast harsh shadows, making everything feel stark and unforgiving. "I need you to explain these," Simon said, his voice eerily calm as he spread papers across the comforter. My heart sank as I recognized bank statements, highlighted in yellow. Withdrawals I'd made for lunches with Ethan, a hotel charge from the afternoon we'd spent together, cash I'd taken out to buy things I didn't want appearing on our joint credit card. "Simon, I can explain." "Can you?" He held up another paper. "This is from Lila's daycare. It's a log of who's picked her up over the past 6 months. Ethan Caro's signature appears here. 12 times. The room seemed to tilt. I'd been so careful about everything else, but I'd forgotten about the daycare logs. "He was just helping out when we both got stuck at work," I said quickly. "You know how crazy my schedule has been and your hours." "My hours?" Simon's laugh was bitter. "Verity, I've been leaving work early for months, trying to get home to spend time with you and Lila. Meanwhile, you've been having another man pick up our daughter from daycare. It's not what you think. Then what is it?" He stood up, towering over me. "Because I'm looking at evidence that my wife has been lying to me for months, possibly years. I'm looking at financial records that show secret spending, childcare logs that show another man acting as a father to my daughter, and a family that's falling apart because of secrets." I felt tears welling up, not from sadness, but from frustration that my carefully constructed world was crumbling. "You're making me feel crazy, Simon. This paranoia of yours is destroying our marriage. Can't you see that?" "I'm making you feel crazy?" His voice rose for the first time. "You've been gaslighting me for months, making me think I was imagining things, that I was being unreasonable for asking basic questions about my own family. I never... You told our families that I'm controlling and paranoid. You've painted me as the villain in this story while you've been living a double life. And now you're standing there trying to make me feel guilty for discovering the truth." My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Ethan. "We need to talk about what happens next." Simon saw me glance at it. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Read it out loud. It's probably just work. Read it, Verity." With shaking hands, I picked up the phone. The text was innocuous enough, but Simon's expression told me he'd already seen enough. "There's something else," he said, reaching into the folder. "I had Marjorie's friend who works at the lab run some preliminary tests. Hair from Lila's brush, saliva from her juice cup." My world stopped spinning. "You had no right?" "I had every right. She's supposed to be my daughter." He pulled out an official-looking document. "But according to this, there's less than a 1% chance that I'm Lila's biological father." The words hit me like physical blows. I sank onto the chair by our dresser, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Simon, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 5 years? That you let me fall in love with a child who isn't mine? That you've destroyed our marriage and our families based on a lie?" "She is yours," I cried. "Biology doesn't matter. You raised her, you love her, you're her father in every way that counts." "Every way except the truth." His voice was deadly quiet. "And the truth matters, Verity. It matters to me, it matters to our families, and it's going to matter to the courts." "Courts?" The word came out as a whisper. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to fight for custody of Lila, not because I don't love her, but because she deserves better than a mother who's built her entire life on lies." He gathered up the papers and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To my mother's house. I need to think, and I can't do that here." He paused at the doorway. "Oh, and Verity, I'm getting an official DNA test done tomorrow. Court ordered, so there won't be any question about the results." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone in our bedroom with the wreckage of my lies scattered around me like broken glass. The law office of Patterson and Associates smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat in an uncomfortable chair across from Simon and his attorney, Margaret Patterson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. My own lawyer, a young public defender named James Wright, seemed overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence spread across the conference table. "Mrs. Drayton," Margaret began, her voice professionally cold. My client has presented substantial evidence of infidelity and fraud. The DNA test results confirm that he is not the biological father of the child in question. Lila has a name, I snapped. And Simon has been her father for 5 years. You can't just erase that with a piece of paper. Actually, Margaret replied, that's exactly what we can do. Legally speaking, Mr. Drayton has grounds for annulment based on fraud, as well as a strong case for custody modification. I turned to Simon, who sat rigidly beside his lawyer, avoiding my eyes. Simon, please, think about what you're doing to Lila. She doesn't understand any of this. You're the only father she's ever known. That's exactly the problem, he said quietly. She's been living a lie her entire life, and so have I. It wasn't a lie, I insisted. I made a mistake, yes, but that doesn't change the fact that we're a family, that you love her. Love isn't the issue here, Margaret interjected. The issue is deception, fraud, and the emotional damage caused by years of deliberate dishonesty. My lawyer finally spoke up. My client acknowledges that mistakes were made, but she maintains that the affair was a one-time occurrence during a difficult period in the marriage. Mr. Drayton was emotionally distant, working long hours. That's not true, I interrupted. I mean, it wasn't just one time, but Simon was emotionally abusive. He made me feel neglected and unwanted. Ethan was there for me when my husband wasn't. Simon's head snapped up. Emotionally abusive? I worked extra hours to support our family. I came home every night, helped with Lila, tried to be the husband and father I thought you wanted. You were cold and distant, I shot back. You never talked to me, never showed affection, because I sensed something was wrong. Simon's composure finally cracked. For months, I felt like a stranger in my own home. You were secretive, defensive, always on your phone. I thought I was going crazy, but it turns out I was just married to a liar. Margaret slid a folder across the table to my lawyer. These are phone records showing over 300 calls and text messages between Mrs. Drayton and Mr. Caro over the past 8 months. There are also hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and witness statements from co-workers who observed their inappropriate relationship. I stared at the evidence, my heart sinking. You've been investigating me? I've been trying to understand why my marriage was falling apart, Simon replied, and now I know. Mrs. Drayton, Margaret continued, we're prepared to offer a settlement. You can have supervised visitation with Lila on weekends, but Mr. Drayton will retain primary custody and decision-making authority. Supervised visitation? I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. She's my daughter. I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her. I've raised her. While lying about her paternity, Margaret said calmly. The court will consider that when determining what's in the child's best interest. This is insane. I turned to Simon desperately. You know I'm a good mother. You know Lila needs me. Lila needs stability and honesty, Simon replied. 2 things she hasn't had in this house. My lawyer leaned over to whisper in my ear, but I pushed him away. I won't sign anything. I'll fight this in court. I'll tell them how you've been emotionally manipulating me, how you drove me to seek comfort elsewhere. Please do, Margaret said with a slight smile. We have recordings of you gaslighting my client, telling family members he was paranoid and controlling, attempting to make him question his own sanity. The court will be very interested in those. Recordings? My voice came out as a squeak. Simon pulled out his phone. I started recording our conversations 3 weeks ago, after you told my mother I was having a mental breakdown. Would you like to hear the one where you convinced me I was imagining things about Ethan? The room spun around me. Every lie, every manipulation, every time I'd made Simon doubt himself, it was all documented. I want to call Ethan, I said suddenly. He needs to be part of this conversation. He's Lila's biological father. He has rights, too. Margaret and Simon exchanged glances. We contacted Mr. Caro yesterday, Margaret said. He's declined to pursue paternity. In fact, he's requested no contact with you or the child. The words hit me like a physical blow. Ethan was abandoning us just like that. He can't just walk away. He can, and he has, Margaret said, which leaves us back to the original custody arrangement. Mr. Drayton is willing to legally adopt Lila and provide her with the stability she deserves, but only if you agree to the terms we've outlined. I looked around the room, at the lawyers, at the evidence of my lies, at Simon's determined face. And if I don't agree? Then we go to court, and you'll likely end up with even less than what we're offering now. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, I realized I was completely alone. The family court was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat at the defendant's table with my lawyer, watching Simon and his attorney arrange their evidence with military precision. In the gallery behind us, both our families had gathered, Marjorie and Mason on Simon's side, my mother Evelyn sitting alone on mine, looking like she wished she were anywhere else. Judge Rebecca Morrison, a stern woman with silver hair and no-nonsense glasses, reviewed the case file with methodical care. This is a petition for custody modification and divorce decree, with disputed paternity as the central issue. Are both parties ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, both lawyers replied. Margaret Patterson rose first. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of a sustained campaign of deception spanning over 5 years. The evidence will show that Mrs. Drayton engaged in an extramarital affair, fraudulently represented the resulting child as my client's biological offspring, and then systematically gaslit him when he began to suspect the truth. My lawyer objected weakly, but Judge Morrison waved him off. I'll hear the evidence and make my own determinations. Please proceed. The next hour was a methodical destruction of every lie I'd told. Margaret presented the DNA test results first, official documents showing a 99.97% probability that Simon was not Lila's biological father. Then came the phone records, the hotel receipts, the daycare logs with Ethan's signature. Your Honor, Margaret continued, we also have audio recordings of the defendant attempting to manipulate my client and gaslight him about his legitimate concerns. Objection, my lawyer said. Those recordings were made without consent. In a one-party consent state, Your Honor, regarding conversations in the defendant's own home about her own actions, Margaret replied smoothly. Judge Morrison nodded. I'll allow it. Play the recording. My own voice filled the courtroom, and I cringed as I heard myself from 3 weeks ago. Simon, you're being paranoid again. There's nothing going on with Ethan. He's just a friend. I'm worried about you, honey. This jealousy isn't healthy. Maybe you should talk to someone about these trust issues. In the background, Simon's voice, confused and hurt. But the phone calls, the late nights. Are you listening to yourself? You sound crazy. I can't live like this, walking on eggshells because my husband has turned into some kind of stalker. The recording stopped, and the silence in the courtroom was deafening. I could feel everyone staring at me, the judge, the lawyers, my own mother. When I glanced back at Evelyn, she was looking down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. Your Honor, my lawyer said desperately, my client admits to making mistakes, but she was driven to seek companionship elsewhere due to emotional neglect in the marriage. She's been the primary caregiver for the child. While lying about the child's paternity, Judge Morrison interrupted. Mr. Wright, does your client wish to make a statement? I stood up on shaking legs. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes, but I love my daughter. Simon knew, deep down, he had to know something was different about Lila, but he chose to ignore it because we were happy. We were a family. Mrs. Drayton, the judge said sternly, are you suggesting that your husband was complicit in this deception? I'm saying that families are built on more than just biology. Simon raised Lila, loved her, was her father in every way that mattered. Now he wants to punish me by taking her away, but he's really punishing her. Simon stood up. Your Honor, may I respond? Judge Morrison nodded. I love Lila more than my own life, Simon said, his voice steady but emotional. But she deserves to grow up in a home built on truth, not lies. For 5 years, I've been living in a fantasy that my wife created. Every birthday, every bedtime story, every "I love you, Daddy," all of it was based on deception. He turned to look at me directly for the first time in weeks. I don't want to punish Lila. I want to protect her from growing up thinking that lies and manipulation are normal parts of love. Judge Morrison studied the evidence for several long minutes. This court finds that Mrs. Drayton engaged in a pattern of deception that undermines the foundation of the family unit. The biological evidence is conclusive, and the audio recordings demonstrate a concerning pattern of psychological manipulation. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her next words. However, the court also recognizes that Mr. Drayton has acted as this child's father for 5 years and has expressed his desire to continue in that role. Therefore, this court awards primary physical and legal custody to Mr. Drayton, with supervised visitation rights to Mrs. Drayton on alternate weekends. Supervised? I gasped. Given the documented pattern of deception and manipulation, the court believes supervision is necessary to ensure the child's emotional well-being during the transition period. She continued reading the order, but the words blurred together. Simon would keep the house, the car, primary custody. I would have to move out within 30 days, submit to psychological evaluation, and could only see Lila under court supervision. As the judge's gavel fell, I felt my world collapse completely. Simon was already being congratulated by his family, while my mother sat alone, tears streaming down her face. I tried to approach Simon as we left the courtroom, but Margaret stepped between us. Mrs. Drayton, all communication regarding the child should go through the court-appointed supervisor from now on. Simon walked past me without a word, his dignity intact while I stood in the courthouse hallway, with nothing but the wreckage of my lies around me. Marjorie paused beside me as she followed her son out. You did this to yourself, Verity. I hope someday you understand that. As I watched them leave, my former family walking away into their new life without me, I finally understood that some lies are too big to survive. But even then, standing alone in that courthouse hallway, I couldn't help but think that if everyone had just minded their own business, we could have been happy. Maybe that makes me the monster they all think I am. But I was just trying to hold my family together, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. Sometimes I wonder if the truth was really worth destroying everything we had. But the law decided otherwise, and now I'm the one left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought I could control forever. The names and details in this story have been changed, but the legal proceedings and their outcomes reflect the real consequences of deception in family relationships. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just shows you the prison you built for yourself. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.